Our next session gives a glimpse into the payments crystal ball. And whilst I invite my panelists to the stage here, I just want to tell you a little bit about the preparation and the thinking behind this session. My oracles on the panel here, we had a discussion about, well, if you look into a crystal ball, how far is it? Because if you look too shorter term, you're almost talking about today. If you go to a longer term, it gets a little bit fuzzy and it has less value in all honesty. So we hit upon a time horizon for our crystal ball of about 5+ years outwards. This is a really broad topic, so we won't be giving a deep dive into everything that our panelists and our oracles, I do like that word, that our oracles mention, but this is just to give you a taster and food for thought. And if I put this time frame into context, if it was 5 years ago, in 2019, we'd probably all be talking about blockchain. And whilst we were using AI, we probably weren't talking about it, or most of us, in quite the same way that we are today. And an evolving landscape brings, changing propositions and winners and losers. And if, we heard a lot yesterday about potential disintermediation, and we'll hear a bit more about that today. So what does that mean also with the partnership landscape? And that's those questions and others that our oracles are going to answer for us. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Sarah, if I could start with you.
Of course you can. It's Sarah Khan, First Direct, part of the very first challenger bank, we like to call ourselves, from the 1980s. Reinventing ourselves to keep up with the future right now. I'm very proud of being there. But myself, just very quickly, 3 facets of career. So I've been front office for a period of time, then I've done transformation, and then I've spent a period of time in innovation, and that's across Asia, UK, and the US. But we can dive into that later.
Thank you.
Jenny Himberg-Wild, thank you very much for having me today. So I work for Barclays Investment Bank, and I'm currently the head of financial institutions for Barclays Europe, which means that I cover clients all the way across the spectrum, from banks to fintechs, to broker-dealers, to specialist finance, affiliates, and so on. And previous to that, many of you might know me from scaling up the business coverage for fintech in Barclays UK.
Thank you. Adam.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Bealey. I'm head of UK and Ireland at Swift. Been with Swift now for coming up to 4 years, but prior to that, 16 years within corporate and transaction banking, including a lot of time at Barclays previously. And many of you may already know, but Swift has been around now for just over 50 years. A global cooperative connecting 11,500 institutions across the world.
Thank you. Jessica.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Jessica Richards, Head of Performance and Business Management at NatWest, and many of you know, I'm sure know NatWest as sorry, I've got a bit of feedback, so I'm just going to speak like this because then I can actually see you all properly. Yes, Head of Performance and Business Management for Payments at NatWest. Many of you know NatWest. We're one of the largest processors of payments in the UK, as well as being one of the largest retail banks. In terms of my background, I have spent many years in payments, mainly in the regulatory and industry space, but my most recent role is more internally focused and essentially a COO for the Payments Center of Expertise.
Thank you. Natasha.
Hi, it's great to meet everyone. I think I'm the disruptor on the panel today. I'm Natasha Zernheimer. I'm the CEO and founder of Opti. Opti is a single integration to a currently 135 new age payment brands, and I've spent 20 years as a retailer. So I invented Opti out of the need of the retail market. So I'm really interested today to put the retail perspective in. I've worked across global markets in luxury fashion and marketplaces, and so really have that very retail and consumer-centric position when I look at the future of payments. So thank you so much for having me, Teresa.
Perfect, thank you. You see, we've got quite a broad lens here and a broad church across our ecosystem. So I'm going to start with you, if I may.
Yeah.
What themes do you see coming down the track in the next sort of 5 years and beyond?
Such a good question. I think I'll take it very high level and a bit blue sky and eagle eye view up the top. I think we talk a lot about, and I think you guys have heard, open banking, AI, and digital adoption has been a theme over the last good number of years. I think what we are going to see, Teresa, is a return of a little bit of a human element. And I'll tell you why I say that. Although it's very exciting, I think with my thought leadership hat on, only today I was reading that NVIDIA was talking about robots in a Disney theme, when I was like, oh my God, we are there. We are in the utopian kind of world. But I think as we do that, we are all going to have this urge of coming back to a little bit of human interaction. You guys are all here because you are connecting with each other. You do need to be around each other. And I think that's the element that we're going to see again. I'm seeing already, and this is a personal view, that we are becoming a little bit fatigued. And I think that we said this before, I think fatigued with the amount of digital channels, a different channel of choices that we're having, and so much thrown at us. And I think in the next 5 years, there's a real kind of shift of understanding, like, what do we use and how do we use it? And what makes us more effective as humans? So I think there is going to be some community element that we're going to see coming back. We are seeing so much going on with Elon doing stuff with chips as well. I think we talked about that. I think there's going to be huge developments in the medtech area as well. But what we will also see is seamless kind of customer experiences. And I think that's what we're all hoping for. Because what we want to do is take the friction out of our journeys. We've seen it in our personal lives, we've seen it in our shopping, we've seen it through COVID and stuff. We want to see that in our banking experiences, and I think that's the thing that we're really looking towards. However, with a caveat, I think John talked about it earlier, we are driven by regulation in this country for sure. So I think we will be looking at regulation to see how much and where the speed is going to be. But yeah, for me, it's going to be a theme of return to human interaction for sure. So don't feel like we're going to get away from that.
I know that when I speak yesterday and earlier this morning as well, that thing about fatigue as well, and the number of channels coming towards you electronically and digitally can be quite overwhelming. Jenny, what changes do you envisage in sort of our ecosystem along a similar time period? But also, which players do you think will be affected?
So it's another good question. If I kind of try to plot some kind of a graph in my mind of the enormous ecosystem that we have in payments and all the various different players that are in it, maybe it looks something like there's something in the middle, which I call a core, and then there's everything else which is around that. And in that core, I don't just put banks in it, I actually put a whole bunch of other things in that core as well. So the incumbents, so let's call that the banks, it's the card networks, it's Mr. Swift over here for sure.
Your new name.
It is all of these incumbents, right? They sit at the core. They have the plumbing, they have the pipe work. And for a very good reason, the core is very protective of the core, right? There are good reasons for it. For example, we are quite proud of the integrity that we built for the financial systems with that core. Now, everything else around kind of connects still into that core. Now, it's a bit more fragmented, and no doubt Adam will touch on the fragmentation around it. Now, do I think the core is silent and is not innovating? Not at all. It is. It's doing lots of things, but 50 years of existence and only now we're talking about ISO 20022. I mean, long overdue, right? If we're thinking like innovation and if you put it into fintech context, how quickly things go on there. But core is doing, it may not be the one who jumps feet first into something. So I think the headlines are created by everything else that happens outside that still very much has to connect to the core one way or another. But more and more that kind of a picture in my mind over the 5 years is developing into this kind of a donut shape. So everything else is kind of coming all around, which kind of means kind of exciting things for the audience out there. Because I actually think that the entry point and the exit point is what's going to get reimagined 100 times over. And I think that is going to be very much done by the players who are out there, right? So they're going to be doing that. Now, do I think that this means that cross-border payments are going to look significantly different? Yes, for the entry point and exit point. In the middle, the core, I think, remains very, very relevant. But there are players who will be doing in, say, domestic market, for example. Let's say I spoke to an Italian fintech quite recently. They have a fantastic model. Now, they do need a little bit of core in there, a little bit of bank interaction, but they have disintermediated all card rails entirely. They have a huge client base and they have a huge merchant base. And there's a big, big adoption on this one. Now, it's quite exciting to see that. It works in the domestic market. I'm not sure if I see over the 5-year horizon that's still in a cross-border payments, and I'm sorry, my team warned me this will be the dullest statement of the panel to say that, but I don't know.
No, if it's something that you've seen in the real world. Adam, I've got to come to you next and say, how does what Jenny said resonate with you?
Thank you, and it does resonate to see, there are a large number of players within the ecosystem, and there's a huge amount of innovation that's going on in the world. And ultimately, I think it's there with the aim of driving better end customer experiences. The danger comes, though, that with all of the players and the fragmentation that Jenny's referred to, is that actually you could end up ending up with poorer customer experiences. There is the danger of that from increased fragmentation risk, creation of digital islands. Therefore, interconnectivity and interoperability at the core is going to be key to combat this and to ensure that we get a better outcome. And then if I look at how new forms of value are coming into the industry, whether that's CBDCs, digital assets, again, there's a risk that if they're not connected into the system, you end up with even more fragmentation that happens. So that's why it's really important that we as an industry collaborate together. And we've seen, and my colleague Nick mentioned this yesterday, that we at Swift have been working with over 30 institutions on a collaboration project in Sandbox for CBDCs, because it is important for the industry. As we look, though, to these new forms of assets that are coming on board, looking at the end customer experience, how we can collaborate as an industry, I think there is a responsibility for us to do that. I've been to a number of sessions, number of panels, number of industry events where collaboration and interoperability is discussed, and I think now is really the time for action. You saw it hopefully from ourselves at Swift last year. We announced collaborations at Sibos with both Wise and Visa, so we're very much looking to make sure that we can, as an industry, raise the bar, take the benefits from the network effect and deliver real value.
I like that the phrase digital island actually really stays with me, because we don't want that. We want superior customer propositions, but we want the interoperability that John spoke about, the standards. I'm big on standards. I'm a very dull woman, but but it's true. Jessica, from you've heard already from the other panelists that clearly there's a lot to consider. But from a strategic point of view, what do we need to be alive to?
Thanks very much. And that's a great question, and actually I'd like to come back to the industry strategy, but first of all, I'd really like to highlight the customer, because I think it's the reason we're doing this. And in 5 years' time, the customer will still be paramount, and we will still be trying to give the customer choice, security, a great customer experience. We'll just be doing it in a different and hopefully better way. And to try and bring that to life, maybe I'll just touch on those. So in terms of customer choice, I have to, as NatWest, mention cash. I know cash is in decline in terms of overall transactions as a percentage, but actually cash usage is going up, particularly in the 18 to 24-year-olds. If you want proof, just go onto TikTok, which my daughter showed me, and put in cash stuffing. Some lady has 800 million views. So that there's a huge focus. I know many policymakers are seeing central bank digital currencies as a future alternative to cash, and we're going to touch on that later, I think. But you just have to look at places like Sweden, where they're pulling back from going cashless, to know that we need a long-term solution. In terms of customer safety and security, fraud already makes up 41% of all crime in the UK. I know at NatWest we've committed to spend more than £1 billion over 5 years fighting fraud and fin crime. But picking up on some of the things others have said, the bad actors are getting more sophisticated, using AI in terms of deep fakes, and we need to use AI, digital ID to fight back and get better technology. In terms of customer experience, I could go on for a long time, but I will pick one, I've been told. And if I had to pick one prediction, it would be that open banking will get its TFL moment. And what I mean by that is essentially there'll be a tipping point towards mass market adoption, where customers will benefit from variable recurring payments, request to pay, person-to-person payments will be revolutionized. And the personalization because of data. So there's so much to talk about there. Going back very briefly to the industry strategy, this will be driven by the HMT's national payments vision and strategy. I think we've probably all heard, or most of us heard, Joe Garner speak very eloquently about this yesterday, so I won't go into detail. But personally, I think this is a golden opportunity to get clarity on a number of industry initiatives. And I would hope in 5 years' time we will have ISO 20022 over instant payments, and I would hope that we would have consumer protections or dispute resolution as well as a viable commercial model for open banking. So whirlwind tour, but and there's loads of more I could touch on, but I'll leave it there.
They would very much be on my wish list as well, and I'd be terribly disappointed if we were here in 5 years' time and some of those things weren't in place. Natasha, thank you for your patience. And as you say, you do have a different lens as well to the rest of the panel. So through your lens, what does the next 5+ years offer?
Look, I think from our lens, it's definitely around hyper-personalisation. So if you think about payments and retailers not offering a wide variety of payments, that's going to be a problem because consumers are becoming loyal to the way they pay. They find comfort in it, and it also enables them to manage their own liquidity. So from my lens, I think that the checkout of the future is one where retailers are going to have to connect with multiple payment methods, and they're going to have to integrate them. And what's going to happen there is, if there isn't some sort of hyper-personalisation in that checkout is going to be awful. So what I really love and what we're at the forefront of doing is basically setting up rule sets that identify either the products in cart, the basket value, or actually the customer themselves and the payment method that they've preferred to use either within that environment or even outside of that environment, which is even more special, and actually personalising that checkout. Now, why do retailers love that? Because that means conversion. If you actually have a checkout that has actually been personalised out of your control for that particular customer, the transaction is more likely to go through. But if that customer in an e-commerce environment is going up and hitting that X, actually saying we've got another 15 ways to pay, is super exciting as well. So I'm not suggesting that there's going to be a crowded checkout in the future, no way. I really think it's going to be about that personalisation. And then on the other side of that, it really is about helping consumers manage their personal liquidity. So what I'm excited about in the open banking sphere and what we're going into now is the ability for a customer to be able to unify all of their payments visibility in a single portal, and that should be their bank. And so for them to be able to log into all of their APM accounts, their buy now, pay laters, even other bank accounts, and see that personal liquidity in a single view, I think is the future. And why do we want to do that? Because we do have a fragmented environment of payments out there, and we do get stuck. We don't know exactly what we owe and whether we are going over our liquidity for that month, and to be able to see it visually, I think is super, super important. So they're probably the two most exciting things. Obviously, that's very data-driven. And on top of that, obviously, there's going to be some great insights that the regulators are going to be able to see around what are the dangers for consumers, how many different types of payment methods are they actually engaging in, and is that bringing them into some sort of trouble? And that will actually help regulation. So I am super excited to have Opti at the forefront of these innovations. We're not only about putting payments in checkout, but we're about what is the next stage of that, and these are some of the innovations that are coming.
liquidity, personal liquidity, particularly today in a cost of living crisis as well.
Yeah.
For people to see all of that, and when John spoke about open fintech, I very much see that in that space. Jessica, you mentioned a moment ago about sort of CBCs and sort of other activity and other content on the horizon. Talk to us a bit about that, if you would.
Sure, so in terms of, I know we were talking before about what is going to happen beyond the 5-year horizon, and I certainly would put central bank digital currencies or digital currencies in that bucket. I would also actually, and I might mention a couple of other things like AI and quantum computing, but we can come back to those or do it now. But in terms of digital currencies, I think every central bank is wrestling with if, when, how to implement a central bank digital currency. And certainly at NatWest, we are part of all those industry discussions, and also how to do it, what the options are and the alternatives. And in fact, one of the most interesting that I've seen is the RLN, so the Regulated Liability Network, which has been described to me as a ledger of ledgers, which I think is quite an interesting concept and way of looking at it. So yes, there's a lot going on, but I think we have a long way to go in terms of central bank digital currencies.
We do. Jenny, coming to you now, Jessica's touched upon different bits of tech, and we have tech for good, Natasha's outlined some of that, but we also have, tech for not so good. What do you see through your lens on that score?
Yeah, so I think actually Jessica already sort of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I was having a conversation with the head of FinCrime on a very big institution. I have all access pass to bank-to-bank conversations too, which is a fascinating space, and I'm sure I won't name them. They wouldn't mind me saying that they were kind of having a conversation with me to say, actually, it's not so much tech for good and tech for bad. It's the same tech that gets used for both.
Yeah.
And anybody who sits here and thinks that any technology is created just for a good purpose, I think are slightly kidding themselves. And really, if you start overlaying all of this, like use of Gen AI, for example, for sure it's being used already for a lot of bad things, and one probably needs to use more Gen AI to counter that, in the world out there. The difference, of course, is that when you're using it for bad, you're not necessarily waiting for your internal SI spend or the regulatory approval to come through, right? You are just going ahead and using it. So I do think that there is a big action call there for everybody who works in tech, just to ensure that kind of keeps it real, and that we are super focused on this. Like, how does one deal with it? And I think every institution, for sure, us in the middle, spend a lot of time on it, but I'm sure also everybody else who's engaged should feel obliged to think through these things. But one thing I would just kind of also throw out there is that as much as we want to geek out on payments and payments ecosystem, the end of the day, sort of like, no one goes out in the evening, I hope no one goes out in the evening into their house and say, oh, let me sit on a sofa, have a cup of tea and make a payment. Like, it's not something that exists for itself. Payments exist for something else. So for me, if we look in the 5+ years and beyond, what's really important is looking at what is happening out there in the world, and payments will follow. So I would go as far as looking into, what are they discussing in Davos? What are they talking about in COP28, right? And if I take from there some inspiration, then I would say we ought to be talking about corporate governance, we ought to be talking about Gen AI, and we ought to be talking about ESG. And those three things, 5 years plus, need to be somehow connected to this industry too.
We do, and I'd like to say many of those topics feature on the agenda. Importantly. It's interesting though what both you and Jessica have said about sort of, using technology for bad, and you're right to make the distinction between technology for good and technology for bad. I think Joe Garner was talking yesterday morning about, if somebody was replicating my voice and it was voice recognition, there are a lot of people from South London who talk like me as well, so it wouldn't be that hard. how on earth do you know it's me and not somebody impersonating me? And it's quite a fine balance, isn't it? Natasha, I want to come back to kind of winners and losers. Through your lens, what new propositions might we see in 5+ years?
Yeah, so I definitely see that retailers are going to be using their own cash to be lending to customers. So I do see retailers actually playing a role in basically having a balance sheet where they're happy to lend to customers. The good old lay-by system years and years and years ago, I think is definitely something that we need to look out for. I definitely think that it's exciting to see the schemes and banks going into lending products, so credit cards now becoming pay and installment products and getting more and more sophisticated. I definitely think that's sort of a future prediction as well, which I think is good. I mean, I think the whole thing is around loyalty, and if customers are loyal to a retailer, a payment method, etc., I think that's a huge opportunity to be seized. I also feel that our own personal mobile phones are basically the way that we're going to pay in every environment in the future, and it's going to look something like walking into a store, handing the products over, being asked for our phone number, which also creates that opportunity for a loyalty engagement from the retailer, getting a payment link on our phones and checking out in an environment that we feel utterly safe with because it's our phone. Our cards are stored in there, our credentials for our APMs, buy now, pay laters are all there. There's a message that goes back to the POS machine and we're out. That means that there's no need for any more paper receipts. That's going to go straight into my bank account. So if I ever want to find the receipt for the transaction, it's there. I mean, I really think that that's exactly where we're going. And I'm excited about that because I think that also makes payments safer for us as consumers. I think it makes it more convenient even for retailers from a loyalty perspective. So a lot to unpack there, but that's kind of where we're focused and where we're heading right now. So I'm excited to see that roll out.
And the banker in me is terrified.
I'm sorry.
Because retailers lending from their own balance sheet. I go straight to repayment, and I'm really old. So like when I did my banking exams, Campari and Ice, and there will be some people here that know what that is. Will I get my money back, KYC, and all the rest of it? But thank you. That's kind of like a brave new world. Adam, from a cross-border point of view, what's on the horizon?
Yes, thank you. So I think if I kind of start now and then move for the 5+ years. So I know at the present time there is a huge amount of effort, resource, time being spent across the industry in adopting ISO 20022. Jenny touched upon this earlier. And it has been a long time coming. There's been lots of discussions around it, but there is a huge amount of traction. I think the call is everybody in the industry adopt and embrace ISO 20022 now, because that sets the common language across the payment ecosystem globally, but also builds a really solid foundation for innovation for the future. So looking forward to kind of the 5+ years, all of the potential pain and challenges that people have experienced will be a distant memory for ISO 20022 adoption. And people have embraced it to not only innovate, but to bring the better customer experiences, to bring the seamless transactions from an end-to-end perspective, but also to utilize the richer data to combat some of the challenges that have been mentioned around fraud. The richer data, the use of anomaly detection, being able to really target that fraud element, and the stats were really quite frightening. 41% of fraud at the moment is financial fraud. That certainly needs to be tackled, and hopefully, services such as anomaly detection and better screening will actually help to tackle that. We're then looking at kind of that 5+ years again. We've got the opportunity through ISO for considerable innovation across the industry to enable multiple options when it comes to checkouts for customers, to give the optionality. But I think more importantly from a cross-border perspective, to ensure that you've got full transparency, full traceability of a payment journey from end to end, irrespective of whether it's gone over one network or many networks or involves a buy now, pay later transaction. It can be seen by all parties, And more importantly, the payer has certainty that they've actually paid. They know that they have paid, and that's there and complete. So I think that's going to be quite key in ensuring that we have that full end-to-end traceability, irrespective of network from a cross-border perspective. We then look at, and coming back to the benefits that you can get, and I think a number of institutions and financial institutions certainly will be looking at putting data-rich services in their customer front-end applications. So ensuring that their customers really get the benefit of the optionality, understand more about their data, their transactions, what's happening, providing them with a better and more seamless customer experience. So quite a lot there, really exciting times, and I think it just drives again that there's a great opportunity for us as an industry to collaborate to ensure that we get those outcomes.
And there's something there, isn't there? Because we talk a lot about optionality and providing data for customers, but I know that conversations around here, you have do you do that for altruistic purposes, or are you able to monetize it? And there's that kind of stuff which I think we're probably still grappling with, and hopefully in 5 years we might have a clearer idea. Or it might be one of those constants, like you've mentioned, of surety of funds and transparency that we're still kind of looking for. Sorry, thank you for your patience.
You're all right, you're good. Give me a break.
Please join us for our working group AGM, which is held.
So there are lots of areas competing for time, resource and budget over the next 5 years. But where's the smart money going?
That's for the AGM working groups.
So don't move,
Hopefully
everyone. I think
heard
she
that.
said stay where you are. Look, we're still led by the customer, and I think we've seen a nice theme of that here. But we're also, I think, getting distracted by technology as well at the moment. I think what we are going to see is, I think for the bankers in the room will understand the word of like the financial life cycle and the personas. I think the personas are already starting to change. And when I say that, I mean if you're a banker back in the days, you would have a very plain cycle in terms of somebody is going to uni, then they're going to get married, then they're going to buy a house, and then they're going to have X, Y, and then it's going to be a pension, and that's it. Now what we're seeing is lots of new journeys emerging within those, and I think there's children, the way that we pay pocket money to children. There's interesting insights where people are not getting married, or people need a different journey and don't want to have children and they're having children later. So I think we need to be open to the persona changes that we're going to see. I think that's one thing. The other thing is we haven't talked about it too much, but I tend to keep a very wide lens to the rest of the world. And when I look out at Asia and some of the innovation going on there, it is absolutely mind-blowing. While we're careful here, I think the way that biometrics and the way that we will be doing, look, we might be using just our hands and walk into make a purchase on just our faces and stuff, and we would have to authenticate that, via our devices. We are all holding, imagine we're all holding devices today. We might not even need to do that, and that might change in a different form. What's that going to look like? So there are new technologies and things emerging. I think there's a race to keep up versus having an awareness of what's going on. But most importantly, by anything in a structural fact, especially in banking, we are led by the customer, and we are the customer. I will say that we all need to keep putting ourselves back in the shoes of a customer. I remind our team this all the time. We're building products for others, but actually you're also seeing your own behaviors shift. So there's a lot going on geopolitically, and I don't want to start talking about that. We're living in a high inflation world at the moment as well. So we've also come out of a plague. I think we look at traditional MBA books and stuff like that, and economic books. We pretty much lived through every major event over the last 2 to 3 years. And off the back of that, we've also got climate change and, ESG, sustainability, and everything else to go on top. So I will be looking to the world and actually hoping that we have some key leaders in key places to really help us drive for a better world. But that is also going to have a huge impact on the way that we make decisions. So let's see where the leadership kind of ends up. Let's see what we do. But at the end of the day, let's keep the customer at the heart. Hopefully there's lots there, but we can unpack that if you want to have a...
We can. Well, what I was going to say is we've got 5 minutes now, and so do think have your questions ready. But whilst whilst we think about that, I just want to whiz back to something Jessica said about quantum. Because if you can give us the quick rundown on quantum, that'd be great.
The quick rundown. I actually love quantum. I studied it 30 years ago at university, and it's finally becoming tangible, so I get very excited. So it's more of a pet topic of mine rather than anything else. I think quantum has huge opportunities and threats. And in terms of opportunities, AI will not reach its full potential until it has the power of quantum computing behind it.
And will you just give us the sort of the 30-second thing on what quantum is, just so we're all on the same page?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so essentially it's, let me talk about keeping you quantum safe, because Q-Day is coming. And Q-Day is the day when quantum computers will be able to break a PKI. Which is a public key infrastructure, and essentially we all need to be ready.
When is this day?
Well, this is. Actually, it could be within the next few years, but I'm talking realistically, 5+ years. But I think it could be sooner. It could be sooner.
Wow, thank you. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, and we've got some roving mics, so please do raise your
Teresa,
hand.
can I just also say,
yes.
we keep saying 5 years, but we're working in months, sometimes as well, so it's with changes going on. I think there's that, things that are emerging daily. I was reading out this morning that, AI will have the ability to kind of do way more, and I'm like, okay, well, what's the use of humans? But actually then we still we are powering them, aren't we?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, if anybody else is as sad as I am and was up like 5 o'clock this morning watching BBC News, there was actually quite an interesting article there which kind of goes to that heart of your personas, but also the polarization, fragmentation, how we need to kind of be inclusive for everybody in the industry. And this piece was actually about slow checkouts. So completely different to what you do on a fast personalization. This is called chatterbox checkouts, right? They're getting very popular. I live in Germany myself. They're getting very popular over there. Edeka is rolling them out. They're very popular in Netherlands. I think they're now rolling them out in Tesco's as well. And guess what the technology of a slow checkout is? It's a human. It's a human has a chat with you. So you queue for a slow checkout just to have a daily chat with the checkout person, right? So I think this is what coming as a key, like that human element and following the customer, like you said, understanding the personas. And I think there's so much going on, to your point. It's like very hard to say it's going to be this or this. It's just going to be a plethora of things, right?
And can we just say that we did say cash on this panel as well? So the abolishment of cash is not complete. I think we still need to keep vulnerabilities in mind. So that is key. We didn't say there's going to be no cash.
No, and I'm not suggesting that as either from a retail perspective. But I think, even having that human contact within a checkout experience, you still want to pay the way you want to pay. It's not really around the conversation or the fact that you feel nurtured within that sales environment. I'm not suggesting that we basically go away from that. I think what we want is we want to create the conversion, and we want to create the conversion so the customer feels like they're in a personal experience. And so I think that if understanding their data in a way that obviously doesn't go against any of the GDPR rules or anything like that, enables that personalization. And retailers are looking for conversion. That's what it's all about. They want to make sure they can upsell, that they can have those loyal customers, and payments plays a significant role in creating that comfort level for consumers. And as we start to do more and more cross-border from a retail perspective, it's about how do we actually enable that personalization in countries where we're actually exporting products to within an e-commerce environment. And that's where having that entire ecosystem of payment methods available to retailers to enable to personalize to not only people but markets, products, etc., you know, it's huge out there, but it's also very exciting.
And needs to be tailored to all of your points, to those new personas that are happening. They've got those checkouts in Sainsbury's here as well. And I must admit, and this is my persona, I'm always like running around and doing 20 things at once, so I have to avoid them. But there will come a day where I might think, yeah, actually, that's for me, because we don't always stay in the same lane, do we? So there is that. And we're out of time, I'm afraid. So I hope that gave everybody food for thought as to, because there's a lot of stuff coming down the line, and depending on which geography you're in and which lens you're looking through, there's a hell of a lot going on. So thank you to our oracles here on the panel, and we'll get ready for the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.